Hi, everyone. It's Mrs. Gill, and I am recording this lecture ahead of time because I am going to be working from home for the next 10 days. And as many of you know, I have four kids, one of which is a 2-year-old, and I figured it would be very difficult to get through some of our content with the constant disruptions that a 2-year-old can present. So, in terms of lecture delivery, I'm going to be making these short videos, but obviously, as you can see from what happened in class today, we'll still be engaging daily, and you can count on me throughout this time, obviously, to help you get through this content. So, as we discussed before, this week we're starting our third unit, which is called Branches of Government. And obviously, then each of the learning goals is going to correspond with one of the three branches. We'll begin today with 3.1, the legislative branch, which, as you know, is the US Congress. So, here's your learning goal for legislative branch. I want you to be able to understand the structure of Congress. So it's bicameral, there's two houses, there's a House of Representatives, there's a Senate, that kind of thing. I want you to talk about and understand how the seats in the House of Representatives are apportioned. So, how does each state get the number that it gets? The representative function of Congress, the powers and functions of Congress, and then also the legislative process. So, in other words, how does a bill become a law? The bolded and highlighted in yellow portion for the learning goal is what we're focusing on today. We will focus on the legislative process next week. So, I wanted to provide you with an overview of each of the houses before we dig deep into what Congress actually does. So, we'll start with the Senate, which is considered the upper body of the Congress. It's the more prestigious body of or chamber of Congress, if you will. There are 100 members, two per state. And if you recall from Unit 1, we talked about the Great Compromise. This is the equal representation aspect of that compromise. They serve 6-year terms and there's no term limits, and they are what's known as a continuous body, which means that in any given election, so take the election that's actually happening as we speak or as I record tonight on Tuesday, um, not all of the Senate is up for reelection like the House of Representatives is. So, what I mean by that is right now there are 435 members in the U.S. House of Representatives. They're all up for reelection. However, in the Senate, only about 30% of the seats in any given election year are up for reelection. So, one third will be up for reelection right now in 2020, and this third won't be up for reelection again until 2026. They get their 6-year terms. But in 2 years from now, when we have another general election, another third of the Senate will be up for reelection. And so that's why it's called a continuous body, because in any given election, 2/3 of the Senate is going to continue on into the next term. They get paid $174,000 per year. And in order to become a senator, you must be at least 30 years of age. You must have been a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and you must be an inhabitant of the state from which he or she is elected. And I have on the slide for you Senator Mike Braun and Todd Young from Indiana, just to give you some face familiarity with who your senators are in Indiana. Next, we provide an overview of the House of Representatives, which is considered the lower chamber of Congress. There are 435 members that are apportioned based on population, which we've discussed at length. Each state is guaranteed at least one seat, and they serve 2-year terms with no term limits. And then, as stated on the previous slide, they are up for reelection all at the same time. So, 2020 right now, all 435 seats are up for reelection. They also get paid $174,000 per year, and the qualifications, while similar, are slightly different. You only have to be 25 years old in order to be a House of Representative member. You have to have been a citizen for only 7 years as opposed to 9 in the Senate. And then here's the one that's exactly the same. You must be an inhabitant of the state from which he or she is elected. So on the right, I have Representative Pete Visclosky, who has actually been our representative up here in District 1. This little, brown reddish one up at the top, you see it says Gary right near Lake Michigan. That's us. That's Northwest Indiana District 1. And like I said, Representative Visklosky has been our District 1 representative for 17 terms, so times two, that's 34 years. And tonight, very excitingly, we are electing a new representative, but I can't put that on the slide yet because the votes are still coming in, right? I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see who wins. And so I'll be able to update this for the next group of kids. And obviously, I'll mention it to you when we get the election results. So, in terms of apportionment, how does each state get the number of representatives in Congress that it gets? So, why does Indiana get 9 U.S. House of Representative members? Well, it's based on our population. Well, how do they know what our population is? And what if our population changes? So, what the Reapportionment Act of 1929 did is it said there's going to be a permanent amount of representative members. So there's going to be 435 members in the House of Representatives at all times forever. It's never going to change. Prior to that, by the way, it grew as the US population grew. So every so often they would decide to increase the number. Well, in 1929, they decided to make it a permanent 435. So what our country does is they take the US census data that takes place every 10 years and they determine how many people live in that particular state. And so then what they do is they reapportion those 435. They redistribute it. And you can kind of see here on this slide what happened in 2010. The really, really dark blue states, they gained 4 seats in the House, so Texas. And then the lighter, maybe the medium blue, we'd call it, they gained 2 seats in the House. So both Texas and Florida are gaining 4 and 2 seats respectively in the House. So what that means is their populations grew significantly in order to get multiple new representatives to their state. The representatives are single member districts, which means one representative represents each district. And then what that also comes out to then is that each person represents about 780,000 people. So in other words, there's about 780,000 people that are living in each congressional district. So we've discussed gerrymandering a little bit, especially if you were here for the episode 3 of the docuseries, Whose Vote Explained. And so this is after the census takes place, after we determine that, yes, Indiana's going to get 9 districts. Now we have to draw the districts. And so a couple things about drawing the districts. One is the state legislatures who draw the districts. So if the Republicans are in office during the time of the census and during the time of redistricting, they have a significant advantage because they can do what's called gerrymandering. Now, I have to just say this just to be unbiased for you that if the Democrats are in office when the US Census data takes place, they also have the opportunity to gerrymander the districts. And what we mean by gerrymandering the districts is they can draw the districts in such a way that the boundaries maximize the influence of a political party or a group of people. So, what that means is if you look at this slide, in this town or this state, let's say there's 50 precincts, which you know are polling locations, 60% of the precincts voted for the blue party, and 40% of the precincts voted in the red party. But because we have winner take all districts, that doesn't necessarily mean that the state or the city that we're working with is going to go to the blue candidate. We can configure the districts in such a way to achieve red victories shown here. And you can see like these shapes are a lot different than the nice rectangles and uniform rectangles that we have on this one where it says blue wins. Under the red wins, they manipulate the shapes in such a way to have 3 districts go red and only 2 go blue. That's gerrymandering. They do it all the time, every 10 years actually. Supreme Court has actually not decided that this is illegal. So it's a technically legal way for both Republicans and Democrats to secure and maximize their influence within state congressional districts. A couple things about the district. The only two requirements are that they have to have an equal number of people, as much as you possibly can, so around 780,000, and they must have contiguous boundaries, which means they have to be touching and sharing a border. That's technically what contiguous means. It means they share a border. So they must have boundaries and share the border. So this is just some of the most unique districts that exist currently, in my opinion. So this is actually a South Carolina district over here in the green. And you can see it's pretty wonky, but it is contiguous. And it technically has the 780,000 people that it should have. Same thing over here. You can see District 4 in Illinois. Very similar to the one in South Carolina in terms of how wonkily shaped it is. But again, it's contiguous, and we're assuming here because it's an actual district that it has 780,000 people. The representation function of Congress. So when we elect representatives to Congress, and that can be to the House of Representatives or to the Senate, they're responsible for bringing they're responsible for bringing the interests and the wishes of their constituents in their home states. What that means is, so if we go back to the slide where I showed you our senators, Todd Young and Mike Braun from Indiana, they're responsible for going to the U.S. Senate and representing Hoosiers, right? We're Hoosiers here in America or in Indiana. They're responsible for representing our interests and our wishes in Indiana. However, they are national politicians, so they also have to weigh national issues against Indiana issues. And sometimes there's going to be situations where something might be good nationally, but bad for Hoosiers. And so, a really powerful example of this is carbon dioxide emissions. Um, most obviously, most scientists are going to tell you that carbon dioxide emissions are harmful to the environment. They do contribute to climate change. Um, and so, if you are a representative from a powerful coal state, maybe Ohio, Pennsylvania, one of these states that really relies on their coal industry, you're thinking, gosh, like I would love to vote on policy that would reduce carbon dioxide emissions, but it's really going to hurt the coal industry in my state. And so you are grappling with this situation. What does it mean to be a representative of the people? So there's typically three different approaches that a congressperson can take. They can take the approach of a delegate, which means that they are going to vote in line with the wishes and opinions of their constituents at home. So I'm an Ohio representative, I'm an Ohio senator. That means that I need to only vote with the interests of the people of Ohio in mind. That's it. I can't consider the benefits that will be received nationally or globally by reduced carbon dioxide emissions. I can only consider how this will impact Ohio voters. Then you have the trustee approach, which allows the representative to use their best judgment when considering what to do. Yes, it might hurt the Ohio coal workers. However, in the long run, this is going to be really good for the planet or really good for the nation. So that would be the trustee approach, where yes, they might be voting technically against their constituents' interests in the short run, but they're trying to use their best judgment, following their conscience, trusting their gut, and making the best decision that they see as possible and available. And then you have the party delegate approach, which is my least favorite, by the way, which is when they vote with their party's views in mind instead of their delegates or their own opinion, right? They vote what the Republicans say because they're Republican, or they vote what the Democrats say because they're Democrats. And I'll tell you, in my opinion, as an adult, just kind of watching how these things happen, I would say that most congresspersons, both representatives and senators, are going to use a combination of all three of these guiding principles or these types of representation. Then we have the functions and powers of Congress. So, according to most political scientists, we can divide congressional powers into three different types. So, there's those that are expressed in the US Constitution. And what we mean by express means that it's explicitly stated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Then we have powers that are implied by the U.S. Constitution. There is something called the Necessary and Proper Clause in the U.S. Constitution that states Congress has the power to do whatever is necessary and proper to carry out their expressed powers. And so, what that looks like is the Constitution explicitly states that Congress has the power to borrow money. However, it doesn't say that they have the power to establish the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve is a system of banks. And so, in order to borrow money, we need a banking system. So, the power to create the banking system is implied by the expressed power of being able to borrow money. Same thing with the creation of the IRS. The Congress has the expressed power to collect taxes. It's explicitly written in the Constitution that Congress can collect taxes. It doesn't say that they can create the Internal Revenue Service to track all of that, but it's implied by the expressed power. The third type of power is inherent powers, which are powers that Congress has just because it's a nation, it's a legislative body. And so it's kind of like powers that go without saying, like declaring war. That's technically an expressed power, but if it hadn't been expressed in the Constitution, it's an inherent power, just in terms of being the representative body and the legislative body of our country. There are 4 other functions and powers that we're going to focus on this unit: investigative function, impeachment power, Senate confirmation, and power of the purse. However, you guys are going to be doing those and exploring those in group work and creating 2-minute, 1-slide presentations for your classmates in order to help us learn those. So I hope you took good notes over this video. If you didn't, you can watch it again, and then please reach out if you have any questions. After this video is over, class is not over, please come back and we'll get started on our group work. Thanks so much, guys. I hope to see you soon.